so much. I love you so much. I love you so much. I love you so much.
Hello, all you positive heads out there. Thanks for tuning your beautiful brainwaves into another episode of the Positive Head Podcast, where we are firmly convinced that creating success and happiness is rooted in understanding the ultimate nature of reality and the fact that as human beings, we are all immensely powerful fractals of the one and only source consciousness, which creates and animates all things. Now, of course, understanding this powerful truth is one thing. Applying this incredibly empowering wisdom to everyday life, well, that's another, which is exactly why we provide you with a fresh serving of soul food for thought 5 days a week to help constantly remind you of what matters most. You are it. And I'm your host, Brandon Beecham. I'm the reflection and extension of you who will be here each Wednesday interviewing a different consciousness changemaker. And on the other 4 weekdays, leading the way to ensure that your perspective is consistently expanded, your vibration is constantly elevated, and your heart is overflowing and full. Also, before we jump into today's episode, I'd like to take a moment to tell you about a few sponsors that not only help to make it possible to produce this show 5 days a week, but that I'm also genuinely passionate about promoting, especially since they're helping to fund all the cool projects we have in the works, such as the Positive Head app, the docuseries that I'm intending to begin shooting within the next year, and whatever else we dream up over here at Positive Headquarters to help spread consciousness across the planet. Now, if you're short on time or just super excited for today's topic and want to dive right in and skip these ads, feel free to fast forward about
4 minutes
to get right into today's show. That being said, I strongly encourage you to listen because the reason I'm passionate about my sponsors is because they've made a huge impact in my own life, which is why I've aligned with these organizations. And I firmly believe they can do the same for you too. The first longtime stellar supporter of the show that I want to mention is Gaia. If you're not familiar, Gaia is the go-to source for streaming consciousness content online with over 8,000 video titles. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. The second sponsor I'm extremely passionate about promoting is Purium. It's no mystery that bringing your mind, body, and spirit into balance is necessary if a person truly intends to manifest the greatest and greatest version of themselves. And as of recording this, it's been about 4 months since I started taking the Purium Core 4 superfood products every day. And I can honestly and sincerely say my mind, body, and spirit have never felt more in alignment. If you've been looking for a way to easily get superfoods into your system every day with a simple plan that can help you reestablish a healthier foundation and relationship with food, I cannot recommend for you to start with the Purium 40-Day Ultimate Nutrition Plan, which includes a 10-day metabolic reset and cleanse enough. I spent personally months researching Purium before I jumped in, and now myself and over 150 other positive heads have started with the 40-Day Ultimate Nutrition Plan, and many of us have continued taking the Core 4 products on an ongoing basis daily ever since. I personally intend to take them for the rest of my life because they played a huge role transforming my vibrational state. If you decide to do it, it'll cost you just over $7 a day for the first 40 days and only about $5 a day after. But if you do it the way that I recommend you to do it, the smartest and most beneficial way, it won't cost you anything. I recommend you to just look at where you can reallocate money you are already spending on food each day. Essentially, you're just going to swap out the unhealthiest stuff you're in the habit of purchasing in exchange for Purium superfoods. And this way, it costs you nothing to participate in the transformation and cleanse. And it creates exponential benefit because now you've replaced something that lowers your vibration with something that is going to make you feel super high in the healthiest kind of way. Just take a few minutes, see where you can cut out $5 to $7 a day and commit to doing it. It's that simple. Also, for support, we'll be doing a big group transformation with other positive heads and soul family once each month for support. So I recommend, going right now, ordering your 40-day Ultimate Nutrition Plan bundle so that you have it when the next group transformation starts. Procrastination is not your friend. Order it now. You can thank me later, because I can assure you, you will not be sorry you've decided to send a message to the universe that you're ready to step up your vibrational game and reclaim your health sovereignty. Just head over to ishoppurium.com. That's spelled ISHOPPURIUM.com. Be sure to use the code POSITIVEHEAD, all one word, for either $50 off or a 25% discount, whichever is greater. And also, if you want to learn more details about the Purium products, why I'm so passionate about promoting them beforehand, you can go check out several videos I shot discussing these things in greater detail. You can also hear my interview with the very inspiring founder, David Sandoval. Much, much more over at positivehead.com/transformation. All right, all you positive heads, on this week's episode, I'm very excited to have David Krantz here with me on the show. David is a health coach specializing in nutritional genomics, epigenetics, and the endocannabinoid system, as well as a music producer who makes brainwave entrainment music. He actually runs a sound chamber in good old North Carolina, where my Beecham roots originally sprouted up from. David, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you, Brandon. I didn't realize you were originally from North Carolina. What part of the state are you from?
I'm originally from Virginia. I was born and raised in Virginia, but on my dad's side, all my roots are from a little town called Wadesboro, which is outside of Charlotte. If you go there, I've been there multiple times, and there's, Beecham graves going back to like the 1700s. So I have neat. Like deep roots in North Carolina. That is definitely the spot for the Beecham side anyway, my dad's side. So
very cool. Well, I appreciate you having me on the show. I'm looking forward to diving into it here.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I definitely some interesting things to explore. And I love being able to bring people on the show like yourself who have, a lot of expertise in areas that I know things about, but I'd love to know more. So as soon as I sort of saw you were on Third Eye Drops, right? Mm-hmm. And as soon as I saw that you're on Third Eye Drops, which, by the way, guys, is part of the MindPod network. If you haven't ever checked out MindPod, I haven't mentioned it in a while, but it's a collective of amazing podcasts, and Third Eye Drops is one of them, and definitely a super, super cool network. If you're looking for new content and other sort of similar but different podcasts, that would definitely be a good one to check out. A good place if you go to mindpodnetwork.com. But as soon as I kind of saw what you were up to with Third Eye Drops, I'm like, yes, please. This would be a great topic to delve down. So I'm going to start at the top with the same predictable starting question I always do. And that is this. David, you're in an elevator. You got 10 floors to answer. The person next to you looks over, says, "What's your passion?" What do you say?
My passion is helping people understand their bodies and empowering them with the information so they can make better choices about their health and their life and whatever it is that's going to lead them to success in whatever it is they want to do. It's kind of my passion.
I love it. So what you're telling me is, with the nutritional genomics thing, it's sort of, you're really trying to discern, does this person's body work better with a regular Twinkie or a Chocodile, right?
Yes.
You got the chocolate dip version or plain.
How much frosting is ideal for your particular genotype, right?
Exactly. Okay, cool. I've been wanting to delve into that, so I'm glad, because I've always been torn between the two. I'm more of a Chocodile man, but let's find out if that's right for me. So why don't we do this, David? Why don't you take a moment and, before we dive into all that, give us a little background in your story. How did you end up on this path that you're on?
Sure. So like probably a lot of your listeners, my path is not a linear one. And I did not start out in health and wellness. I actually started out in music. My background is in music, and I've been playing instruments since I was a little kid. Some of my first memories are like dancing to the Beatles on my parents' bed. And I've always just been one of those people that's super attuned to sound. Like I'm the guy at a show that just can't not dance. I have to.
Right.
So music has always been this sort of, really deep part of my life. And I went to college and got a degree in audio engineering and music technology. And I still produce electronic music, but about 4 or 5 years ago, I kind of went through a major life rehaul health crisis situation where I was having weird symptoms. I was passing out kind of randomly. It was pretty scary. And, I went to traditional conventional Western doctors, and their assessment was basically, you're actually pretty healthy. There's nothing we can really do for you. There's not a pharmaceutical we can give you. And there's not really anything we have for you. And my response was, well, wait a minute. No, there's something that isn't right here.
Right.
And you're telling me that everything's fine. There's clearly some dissonance going on. And it really led me down the path of looking into my own health and really becoming a sponge and just absorbing all the information that I possibly could. And the two sides of my life kind of intertwined all at once, where in terms of music and health, where I was working at Moog Music, which is a synthesizer company. They're the biggest synth company in the United States. And I was working in their factory calibrating synthesizers for them. And at the time, I was just super into health, listening to every podcast and course I could get my hands on. And I think your listeners will appreciate the synchronicity aspect of this here, but I had found this podcast, and it was like the best one I had found, and I was just listening to every single episode. Really. Oh,
you found my show! Wow!
Yeah,
all right. Yes. So glad you found me, David. It's such a pleasure.
Well, it was in the health and wellness realm, and so
okay.
So it was this podcast I was listening to, and I took a walk outside on my lunch break one day and realized that the logo of the podcast was on a building next door.
Wow.
And
that's
it turned out
cool.
Right. And it turned out the doctor who ran this podcast had an office literally a block away from the building where I was working in. And
wow.
Yeah. Right. So synchronicity number one. So I made an appointment just to go see him because I wanted to get some blood work done and I wanted his opinion. And I met with him and we had a great conversation. And it turned out that his partner who co-owned the clinic was an audiologist and peak performance expert for the Air Force. And she had built this experimental sound chamber in that building. And they were looking for someone who had an interest in both health and understanding of audio engineering to create programs for.
What a trip. What a trip.
Yeah. So it kind of, it was a no-brainer. I said, well, I'm going to quit my other job and come over here with you a block away. And shortly after I did that, the doctor that I had made an appointment with, this guy named Dr. Dan Stickler, he decided that he was going to kind of stop seeing clients and start teaching a bit more, because he had developed this pretty unique method of using genetics in his practice, and there were a lot of other doctors asking to teach what he had figured out, and he kind of needed beta testers to be the first participants in his training program. And so I was there at the absolute right time. And, what he was showing me was, a step or two beyond what I was able to learn on my own, but it was right in line with a lot of the stuff I had figured out in terms of my own body and my own health. And it was just this sort of natural, everything falls into place. And all of a sudden I am sort of gifted this key by the guy who's, figured this out in terms of, genomic based medicine. And it was really amazing. And it kind of launched me into the path of helping other people figure out their health issues and move towards optimal health. And that's kind of my story. And since then, I've just been refining my ability to understand how to help people and how to, really give people the kind of a personalized approach to food, supplements, kind of the whole range of lifestyle factors that are going to influence health, and really doing it from an epigenetic standpoint. So looking at, what is your base set of genes that you have, and what can we do to make them express in the most optimal way possible? Which, it's, if you're on the spiritual path, if you're on the path of, really wanting to know yourself, it's a critical piece. It's a critical piece to understanding how can you, treat your body in a way that's going to leave you most connected to yourself, to other people, be most present. And, I really love working with people on cognitive and brain function and really boosting that ability to stay aware, stay focused, and, have the available energy that you'd want to have throughout the day and whatever it is you're doing.
I love that. Yeah, it's such a fascinating road that, it seems like we're just recently going down. We've heard it our whole lives that, it's in your genes, it's in your genes. And, when then we believe this story, it's like, oh, I'm predispositioned to this or that, or I am definitely getting this or that because my grandmother did and my mother did and whatever. And then you look at, this idea of turning genes on and off. I actually had Dr. Bruce Lipton on a while back, episode 161. Oh, but, I'm sure the book well, The Biology of Belief, basically showing how we turn, genes on and off based off of beliefs. And, now you take it down. I'm sure you explore that whole side of things. You mentioned like spirituality and whatnot, but then also nutritional genomics, which is how genes are affected by nutrition, right? That's sort of one of your areas of expertise. So to me, the idea of understanding those two things is like the holy grail, the future of how we approach, medicine and personalized medicine, or maybe medicine's not the best word, health and wellness. And so I think that's a absolutely crucial and fascinating, area of study and expertise that you're developing there.
Yeah, well, Bruce Lipton is definitely a pioneer, and I look forward to hopefully getting to pick his brain one day myself. But yeah, you're right. It's a relatively new field because we only mapped the human genome at the beginning of the early 2000s. So we've only had the technical ability to look at this stuff for only a short amount of time. And when you look at the kind of divide between what the real hard science researchers are doing and then what, doctors and clinicians and coaches like myself are able to do. There's a little bit of a time gap between doing the research and then figuring out how do we use it. So sure. I'm sort of part of this first wave of coaches and people that are really learning how to apply this information. And like you said, you can impact your genetics, your genetic expression, turn genes on and off through beliefs, through the way that you think, through all kinds of different things, nutrition, light exposure, stress, what herbs you're taking.
Sound, right?
Sound, absolutely. And that's the really, really exciting thing about epigenetics. And just to kind of give your listeners a little bit of a definition here, epigenetics is the study of how genes get turned on or off over time. And you can kind of think of it as almost like there's a dimmer switch on each one of your genes that when certain chemical groups, say, get attached to them in response to, having a stressful event or eating a certain type of food, your body's constantly changing this genetic expression up and down. Right. Like if you think about hormones that cause you to go to sleep, like melatonin, you want that to only fire at a specific part of the day, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and it should be off during the day. And so there's a gene that kind of gets turned on and off over time for each one of these timed functions. And we can influence that. And it's really exciting because it's not just food and it's not just, thoughts. It's kind of everything at once. Epigenetics has really shown that there are multiple pathways that can lead to the same outcome. So a gene might get turned on because you did, an hour of meditation every day for 3 months, or it might the same gene could get turned on because you were doing heavy exercise or you were taking an anti-inflammatory herb. We're looking at, in that case, like a positive gene expression. And then in the other cases, a gene could, get turned on to that kind of produces a less desirable outcome because you're eating junk food every day, or you are engaged in like a stressful relationship and constantly ruminating on something. And what's really, amazing is that we have the opportunity now to look at what are the different ways that we can stack these things together to improve health. And it's almost the exact opposite of the kind of Western medical model of one specific, we need one pathway and we need this one narrow viewpoint. It's really looking at things from this whole system's perspective. And it's very liberating, too, to understand that, like you said, early on when we first discovered DNA, they really thought that your outcome is almost predetermined, that there isn't this intermediary kind of control system that could give you some influence over the way that your genes express themselves. And when I was in high school biology class, we learned that your genes code for proteins and those proteins code for traits. And that's the dogma of biology. And so if you have a gene that's going to code for higher risk of heart disease, well, you're probably going to get heart disease. And really in the past 20 or so years, that idea has just been absolutely turned upside down. And it's it's true to some degree, but it's only a very small part of the picture. And it's the environmental part. It's the interaction with your environment and what you do throughout your life that really determines, what those things are in terms of what's going to show up for you. And it's very liberating to understand that you don't have to follow the same path that your parents did or your grandparents. And, I imagine that a lot of your listeners are kind of on the self-development and growth route. And it's the same concept of like, if you were raised in an environment where, your parents were fighting or arguing and you have made a commitment to like learn how to, handle your emotions and become more aware of yourself and not pass that same pattern on to the next generation. It's the same thing in terms of looking at what your physiology is and, what, risks in terms of different types of diseases are you carrying, and how do you shift those, and how do you not just do it for yourself, but do it for your kids and their kids, because the epigenetic factors, they can be inherited as well. So it's pretty exciting and empowering information, I think.
Yeah, it goes right along with so much of what we talk about on the show, and understanding that ultimately it's all so malleable. We've had these ideas about how fixed everything is, and the more we know, the more we realize we don't know, and the more we realize, like, oh wow, I can affect so much with my beliefs, with my meditation practice, with the nutrition that I'm putting into my system, and it's just such an empowering time to be alive.
Absolutely. And what I do is I kind of take it one step further with people in terms of not just looking at it from a general sense, but looking at it from a personalized sense. And the amazing thing is your DNA code is 99.9 the same as mine. And it's that 1.1% difference that makes us unique. And based on those, so based on those tiny little amount of difference, I mean, and there's hundreds of millions of different base codes in the genome. So we're talking about, still a pretty large number of these different variances. But what all the research has kind of allowed us to do now is, say I have a particular variant, say I have the letter A in my genome in this particular place, and you have the letter G in your genome in that particular place. Well, there's good studies now that show that, based on that sort of underlying code, you might need something different to create optimal expression in that gene than I might. And so, I imagine you've probably had the experience at some point in your life of a friend or relative trying a diet and just raving about it and being like, this is the best thing ever. I've lost all this weight. I feel great. You should try it. You have to try it. Everyone has to try it.
Right.
and so you get these kind of diet super fans because things work really well for them. And then their friends or their relatives don't have the same experience necessarily. And, if you've tried a diet because your friend did and it didn't work for you, you probably kind of owe it to yourself to look into what might be causing that and what you could actually do to really just find something that works for you without having to experiment over and over again and fit into someone else's box.
Right. How do you do that? How, in your case, when you're working with someone one-on-one, are you using tools like, 23andMe or Ancestry to actually look at someone's, DNA, their genes?
Yeah. So I can use 23andMe or Ancestry. Right now, we actually use a very similar test that we do through a private lab, just in terms of looking at privacy concerns and making sure that you own your data. 23andMe, isn't going to sell your data, anything like that. But if you do have 23andMe data done, I can also use that. It's kind of a similar process. And, the important thing to know is like and 23andMe doesn't really tell you this, but it's a cool feature that when you go to your dashboard and you're logged in, they give you the number of couple reports that are kind of surface level, most of them. But then you can also download your raw data, which has about 600,000 different variants that you can go in and, work with someone like myself, or there's tools out there that you can look into this yourself and sort of piece things together. But yeah, I look at that type of data that breaks down all of the different what they call SNPs. They stand for single nucleotide polymorphisms. It's a pretty big word. Basically, just means variance in gene from one person to another. And
gotcha.
Yeah, so I look at about 400 or 500 different ones that we know really well. Like these have a tendency to mean this or mean that, and we know that people with this particular variant tend to do better with, say, higher saturated fat or lower saturated fat or less carbs or more carbs. And you can get really granular too in terms of like looking at how people process different vitamins and micronutrients, vitamin D and C and B12, all the whole range. I can look at and kind of give people an understanding of, well, what is your body doing on the inside a little bit better.
Right. Yeah, that's fascinating. It's just fascinating that we can go that deep now and sort of, and I imagine, a year from now, we understand more. 10 years from now, we understand even more. It'll just be a trip to see where we're at, decades from now with our understanding of the type of work. I'm picturing you. You're a pretty young guy. Like I can picture you like, 50 years from now, very gray hair. And it's like, oh man, I remember in the early days when I only could see and understand this. And now it's like, it's just this wealth of it. It's like opening Pandora's box, right?
It really is. And new studies are coming out every day. And, I keep my ear to the ground for that. And it's almost overwhelming to try and sort through all of it. So, it is nice to have, I'm part of a couple groups online where we kind of trade notes on this kind of stuff. And, cool. It's very exciting. And in 10 years, 50 years, I mean, who knows? I imagine that at a certain point, this type of information will be standard, like when you're born, like here's your readout, right.
Yep. This is you. We're going to start looking at this from day one. Whereas now it's like this fringe approach still to sort of, approaching health and wellness and understanding yourself. It's funny to think that, without question, it'll become, sort of standard procedure, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think at a certain point, you almost have the ethical argument of if we have the capability when someone is born to tell them, at a inexpensive, like routine kind of level, like you need to avoid these certain foods and eat these certain foods in order to, really make yourself, in order to create an optimal human, to have the highest expression of, whatever it is you're going to be. Like, I feel like there's almost an ethical responsibility to provide that information to people at a certain point.
Yeah. Do you find there's a dramatic difference? And, you hear a lot about this, this idea with veganism versus, some certain blood types, need meat, or, that's one of the arguments that you hear. And of course, that's a hot topic in our world, this whole, vegan versus, people eating meat is harming the planet ultimately, and the ethical, all that. We won't go into all that, but that's a whole nother conversation. But curious what you find from your perspective on that topic.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. And the blood type diet got popular about 10 years ago, and it has some loose correlations with that. But what we found is that the correlations that were being found in the blood type diet, you can get a lot more specific with the genetics, and a lot of the genetics correlate to some of that blood type stuff, but they're not, but the blood type itself doesn't really predict that stuff that well. So, if you have A type blood, you might have a cluster of certain genes that are kind of associated with that. And those variants tend to predict the nutritional response a bit better than the blood type itself. So it's getting a little bit more direct and a little bit more down to what those factors are. And in terms of, meat versus vegan, vegetarian diets, it really is dependent on the person. And I'll give you an example of a particular gene that can impact that pretty significantly. There's this gene called BCMO1, and it has to do with this enzyme that helps you convert beta carotene from orange and yellow vegetables, the vitamin A, into the active form of vitamin A that your body actually uses. You actually don't use beta carotene. You have to convert it into this form called retinol. And people have a very, very wide range of ability to take plant food vitamin A and turn it into the active form. And if you have a lower ability to do that, it's more advisable to eat animal products to get the active vitamin A from the animal products directly. And this is one of the factors that when you see people, that have been on a vegan diet for 5 or 10 years and they kind of burn out because they haven't been, making up for some of those things with supplementation, because it's perfect. It's definitely possible to be a healthy vegan. You just have to pay a little bit more attention to some of the supplementation pieces. This is one of those factors that we see pretty often, that they're low in vitamin A and they weren't getting it from the source that they really needed it from. So, interesting. Yeah. So I think there's, looking at diet from, what is going to be optimal for you as an individual, and taking the ethical side out of the equation for a minute, which is, is important and, really valuable to look at. And I think I'm not a fan of factory farms at all. I think they're horrible. And
with you.
I eat meat myself, but I make it a point to source it and support farms that are doing it, correctly and integrating it into a more sustainable approach. Right. That's what I recommend for my clients too. But I do think that there is an innate need for some people more than others to have meat. And I think that actually looking at it from the genetic perspective can give more compassion and more empathy to say, someone who does need to eat a bit more meat and really doesn't do well nutritionally with a vegan or vegetarian diet. Because I see a lot of judgment and a lot of, kind of wagging the finger at people. And I do really think that in some cases, it's really worth understanding how people are wired in order to better understand why they might be choosing that and why their bodies might be more inclined to be really craving it. And, I talk to a lot of people that have tried and been on vegetarian and vegan diets, actually myself included, for about 3 or 4 years, that eventually just found that when they ate meat again, like something turned back on in their brain or body.
Yeah. I found for myself, because I've done both as well. And I found I didn't have a major change, so I'd imagine you'd probably dive in and look at my genome and see that, I'm converting some of these things better than maybe others. But that's an interesting perspective and thought. I'm sure there are people out there who would have make the argument that it's not necessary, and we absolutely don't have to eat meat, and but I guess that's a debate that will go on for quite some time, and maybe it'll never end. I don't know.
Yeah, and I understand where a lot of people like that are coming from, but for me, I'm more just concerned in general with what is going to create the best nutritional outcome for people. And it's, I try to stay out of the moral and ethical side of it for my clients and leave that up to them. And I do work with vegans and vegetarians and help them understand how they can, help, fill in some of the gaps that might be there from not eating meat or animal products. And I enjoy doing that. I think it's
seems like a healthy approach.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, now seems like a good moment to take a quick minute to tell those of you who aren't familiar a bit about our sponsor, Gaia. I've been a big fan of Gaia for many years now, which is why they're the only content provider I've ever reached out to in regards to potentially supporting this podcast. So needless to say, I'm very excited they're now supporting the show. Gaia truly is my personal go-to source for streaming consciousness content on the web. They have an incredible 7,000 plus exclusive videos covering 5,000 years of wisdom. Just to give you an example, on the show Missing Links, the incredible researcher Greg Braden explores all the biggest questions concerning who we are, where we come from, where we're going, by connecting the missing links between science and spirituality to complete our understanding of humanity's history and to better understand the interconnectedness of all things. Awesome, right? And that's just one example. As you guys constantly hear me say, it's a daily conscious effort to maintain an elevated vibration. And if you're looking to go deep down the rabbit hole to do so, then Gaia is the best place I know of to do it, period. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out. One of the things that I'm really excited to kind of learn your thoughts on is it's, of course, in the last few years, we're seeing this, blasting open thing that's happening with cannabis, CBD, and I've certainly educated myself. I've actually started... I'm no expert, but I've started taking CBD for the first time in my life just within the last few months. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Purium or not, but this show is basically sponsored by Purium, and I'm friends with the founder, and just an amazing group, and of course they're very meticulous about the products, all the products that they're putting out into the world. And so I hadn't really taken CBD before getting involved with Purium, and so I started a couple months ago, and at that time, not only have I really loved using CBD, because I found personally with THC, a lot of times it can create that sort of anxious effect. I used to smoke, a fair amount, pretty infrequently now, from time to time, and there's still things about it I like, but I'm curious. I just want to go down that complete rabbit hole of THC, why it affects some people, absolutely love it, why others it creates this anxious effect. I'm sure it has something to do with the genes. What your thoughts are on CBD, and let's just go all the way down that rabbit hole, if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's been kind of my area of obsessive research over the past year or so. I am one of those people that the first time I smelled cannabis when I was like 14, it just lit my brain up, and I was like, what is this magical thing? I need to know what this is.
I need it.
It just clicked with me, and I always had a lot of trouble understanding why it wasn't like that for everyone else. Yeah. And, I remember having,
I think a lot of people that smoke, that it seems to be the case. They're just like, how are you not obsessed with this thing? Like I am,
Yeah. I remember having a girlfriend in high school that I got her to smoke for the first time. And she was like, I don't feel good. I don't like this. And I was like, what, are you crazy? Like, what's going on? And I had never really understood that until I started looking at the genetic side of it. Because over the past 10, 15 years, there's been some really interesting and well-conducted studies that show, there are kind of these innately wired factors that can make someone enjoy cannabis versus really not. And there's a number of different things. One of them is just how you metabolize THC, how you break it down in your body. And some people are predisposed to just not breaking it down as fully. And so about 20% of the population or so has a slower THC metabolism. And you can kind of predict this and look at this with some genetics. And so in the studies, they give THC to a group of people, and people with the slow metabolizer variants would have 50% more THC in their bloodstream.
Wow.
And it would stay in there for longer. And they would experience, much more intense effects, and say that they're, 3 days later that they're more drowsy and they feel kind of the hangover effects of it. And there's at least 50 different variants that I know of that kind of all, can impact these things in subtle ways. And, what you were saying in terms of just you having the experience of sometimes it being a little too intense, a little, getting kind of that anxiety, paranoia from it. There's also genes that tend to be correlated with that response. And so, what I've developed now is this panel that I run with people where I can help people understand some of those dynamics. Are you more predisposed to, kind of those anxiety type effects from THC? And if so, what can you do as far as combining it with CBD or maybe some of the other terpenes and phytochemicals in the cannabis plant that you might want to look for specific strains, or even I like combining essential oils actually with cannabis because
interesting.
Because the cannabis plant, it's amazing. I mean, it produces, you know, all this, the strain names are like, grape and orange and, all these different fruits and pine flavors. And it's capable of producing so many scents and aromas. And the chemicals that they produce are called these things called terpenes. And they're not just isolated to the cannabis plant. Like this is what makes lemons smell like lemons, terpenes, and they show up in all these other plants. So you can actually kind of modify your cannabis experience a little bit by smelling certain essential oils at the same time, rubbing a little bit on your hands, because one of the most consistent and I think important research that's been done is looking at what they call the entourage effect of how all of these phytochemicals in the cannabis plant contributes to how well it works. Where if you just isolate THC or you just isolate CBD, it kind of loses some of that magic a little bit because it doesn't have all of these other phytochemicals that seem to kind of modulate other brain function around it and just make it work better. I mean, it's just remarkable. It's kind of trusting nature's formula there. But yeah, you can use, for example, clove oil has a lot of this terpene called beta caryophyllene in it. And it's associated in cannabis strains with the more actually anxiety reducing and sedative kind of calming effects. And so, if you're someone who is prone to experiencing anxiety from cannabis and THC, but you want to kind of play with that and see if you can get some of the positive effects, maybe creativity or relaxation, whatever it is, you can combine a little bit of clove oil. Black pepper oil also has it in it too.
Like ingesting the clove oil?
Yeah, any way is really okay. Like smelling it, you actually do get some of the activation from that. So, smelling it, ingesting it, rubbing it some on your skin transdermally, all those work. And it's really pretty remarkable. It's almost like an instant effect too. It's very, very unique.
Wow. I'm gonna have to try that. That's interesting.
Yeah. And yeah, I think there's just, in terms of developing empathy, and I'll speak for myself in terms of understanding other people's response and relationship to cannabis better.
Right.
It has absolutely changed the way that I understand, how people might, not be as drawn to it as I am, or not have such a positive relationship to it. And then in that case, if they want, some of the benefits of it, maybe there's other ways to kind of change and shift the cannabinoid system too, because there's a lot of different plants and things that can impact that.
Interesting.
So
I'd love to hear sort of your breakdown and explanation of, because there's probably quite a few. I mean, I'm sure a lot of the listeners are knowledgeable about THC and even CBD, probably less CBD, since that's sort of newer on the scene, if you will. But I'd love to hear sort of your explanation of CBD and how it actually, affects our system and why that's, become such a powerful tool that's being used in medicine, being used.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that question itself is one that is constantly being, we are constantly getting more answers to that. Right. And so I'll kind of give, a basic answer in that, we've discovered that we have these cannabinoid receptors on basically every single cell in the body. So we're
pre-wired for those who aren't aware, we're pre-wired for this is already a part of our inherent system to accept these either internally or exogenous in this case, right, where it's coming from externally.
Exactly. And we have endocannabinoids, which we create and synthesize in our own bodies, and they match up with those receptors and activate them. And what's important to note is that evolutionarily, when the endocannabinoid system kind of came online, was before a lot of the development of other systems in the body. So it's an ancient system. It kind of underlies a lot of things like in the nervous system, and can impact a lot of different function in a lot of ways, which is one of the reasons why CBD has so many uses, because it's so ubiquitous in the body in terms of how these receptors work. And the unique thing about CBD is that it's not actually active at those receptor sites. Very, very weak, what they call agonist, or like the ability to bind to those receptors. But what it does really well is it changes the levels of your body's own cannabinoids. It changes your ability to produce more of the endocannabinoids you naturally make, which in turn activates those receptors. And so like THC directly activates the receptors, and that's one of the reasons why it's psychoactive. And CBD is generally pretty non-psychoactive for people, and that's one of the real advantages of using it.
You don't get high.
Yeah, for people that don't want to be high, and so there's a pretty wide range of uses for it. Nerve pain. Working with autoimmune conditions, immune function in general, weight gain, weight loss, it just tends to be somewhat of a balancing type
calms
agent.
The nervous system. For me, I'm someone who runs a lot of energy. I'm pretty excitable, hyper at times. So that's really what I like about it, is when I take it, I can really feel it sort of creates a calming effect. And that, it's nice for, in my case, to kind of take that edge off at times, but yet, I'm not high, and I'm not, having some of the effects that you would have from THC, which take you down a whole different rabbit hole.
Yeah, absolutely. And some people find it's very helpful for sleep for that reason too, because of the relaxation effects.
Right. And, interesting.
And it's, it's better for certain things in terms of, are you combining it with THC or other terpenes and cannabinoids? Like, for example, nerve pain seems to do really well with about a 1-to-1 THC to CBD ratio, whereas other conditions and things tend to do a little bit better with either higher or lower THC. So there is an aspect of using it in conjunction with other parts of the plant, and we're really, really just beginning to understand how cannabinoids work. And there's over 100 different ones that they've identified in the cannabis plant.
Wow.
And there's good research on, about 2 or 3 of them right now. There's more research coming out, and there's some interesting ones with all different kinds of names that sound kind of similar. CBC, CBG, CBDV. Like they're all different kind of variations of that. But what they're finding is that they really are they do have different functions in the body. And I think, 5, 10, 20 years from now, we're going to have a much wider range of available, very targeted kind of uses for these things. And, they're anti-inflammatory, they're pro energy production. They really are, some of the most exciting, I think, new compounds that science is looking at. And they're not new, obviously. Like, this is an ancient plant that's been around forever that we've evolved over time with. And, so there's always like, and that tends to be my natural perspective, my sort of baseline perspective in terms of like, I love plants. I love the natural world and everything there. And so I kind of have to step back and forth between that holistic understanding and the sort of isolation of these different compounds, and, really see how those two perspectives inform each other. And there's one of the nice things about the cannabis research kind of field and industry is it does tend to attract more people with that type of holistic mindset than say, people studying other compounds and that type of thing. There's just, because of, I think, the mind expanding nature of the plant itself, it tends to lead to that.
Right. Yeah. One of the things that's been the most fascinating for me to see with CBD, of course, using it myself, like I said, it really calms my nervous system, and, I really like the effect, and it's very subtle, of course, too, right? Because you're not getting high and whatnot. But one of the things that's been profound to see some of these videos where, children who have Asperger's or, seizures, and it just completely like, the seizures vanishing, or like the guy I saw recently with Parkinson's, I think it was, where he's just shaking like crazy. And then within moments of taking it, he can talk, he's calmed down. It's like miraculous effects for some people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, and I didn't mention that at all. The effectiveness for seizures, especially in children, is pretty strong.
Profound.
And there's now, an FDA approved drug based on it that's being prescribed for people like that.
And it was only a few years ago, people were like having to go to different states to get it for their children, right? It's crazy. It's come a long way in a short time.
Yeah, it really has. And it's really thanks to a lot of really passionate people that have, made it their mission to make sure that this medicine's available for people. Yeah. It's inspiring to see.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. Wow. So here's a question that I have for you that my friend Chris Jackson brought up to me not so long ago. We were talking, and I should have reached out to him before this to reference the book. He's talking about it, and you probably know. He's talking about a book where there was research done in regards to THC and why it has that sort of known effect of people, having trouble with memory and recall. And he was talking about one of the things that it does that was explained in this book was when we're smoking THC, and he said he's seen it a lot where working with people in like a coaching capacity, and they'll have sort of a big breakthrough, and then, but if they've been smoking THC, they kind of end up on repeat. Like the same thing comes back up because our memory, like when we're on THC, we actually do a non-selective memory dump, whereas typically, this is kind of the way he described it. He would describe it better than me, but he was basically saying that like when you're normally each night your brain is dumping things that are irrelevant to it and sort of clearing up memory, if you will, whereas when you're on THC, it's just doing like, it's just dumping everything, and it's and all the good stuff that you normally wouldn't be dumping. So in his case, he was correlating this to having seen people have breakthroughs, or people that smoke THC regularly. They'll have they end up kind of in a stuck pattern. It stunts their growth because they'll have breakthroughs and growth and learning lessons. But then because they were high, it's like, then all that's flushed down the toilet, and they start right back over where they were the day before. Are you familiar with this? You know what I'm talking about?
I'm not familiar with that particular book, but what you're saying kind of makes sense in terms of the way that it might change sleep architecture a little bit, because it does change some of the different sleep phases that you go through a little bit at night, and when that memory dump type thing would be happening. And I mean, honestly, it mirrors my personal experience with cannabis, where I was not able to really do a lot of the breakthrough type personal work until I stopped smoking it because I was smoking it every day for 10, 12 years, until my mid-20s. And giving myself that cognitive capacity back was really, really impactful. And it does, impact. I'd be very interested to look at those studies in conjunction with some of the genetic stuff, because there's some good genes that impact memory function.
Right.
And there's some that seem to actually be very protective of lowered cognitive and memory function with THC, and then some that really predispose people to the forgetful stoner who can't find their keys type archetype.
Right. And we've seen it all, and we've all seen it. We've all known that person who's smoking all day, every day. And, 5 years can pass and it doesn't seem like there's been any change in their, in their development or, their circumstances. Right. And I think, so when he explained this to me, it made sense. And I really should have, if I'd have remembered, I would have gotten the book name and everything before this recording. But I can find that out if you're interested and send it to you.
Yeah, I'd love to. And, I think it's important to really look at that dynamic from an objective standpoint in the context of being someone who's pro cannabis. I'm as pro cannabis as they come, but at the same time, I'm also very familiar with some of the negative personal effects that it can have when it's treated as a crutch and as something that, is disassociative. And so I think there's always the aspect of are you treating this with respect? Are you treating it in a way that is serving you, or are you just using it to get by? Which, at certain times in life is fine. And they actually really do show how, in some of the studies that it does really positively affect people's stress response. And some people really do use it to manage, just stress, PTSD, that type of thing. And so for that, it's a little bit different, but, I always try and see substances like that as a bridge. How can you, use it for a period of time to deal with something like that, and then also be seeking help in other ways to, not necessarily have to, rely on that.
Right.
And, the memory, what you were saying about the selective memory thing is really fascinating, and it makes sense. I mean, there's this gene called COMT, and it's been studied in a whole bunch of different areas. One of the most recent things they found out about it is that people with a certain variant actually have a better placebo response than people with the other variant.
Oh, wow.
And this is a study that came out, I think, last month. But interestingly, the same variant that makes people have a better placebo response is protective of short-term memory loss with THC. And there's a study where they looked at, people, they let people smoke weed and then had them do this memory test where you basically have to keep two numbers in your head, and you keep having to add more numbers and remember them. And it's one of those things where if you're trying to remember a phone number and you look away from your phone and you lost it, it's that type of memory process that they were testing. And they found that people with the variant where they had higher amounts of the COMT enzyme, those people had about 40% reduction in working memory capacity. Wow. And then people with, pretty strong. And then people with the low COMT enzyme activity, they only had about 11% reduction.
Wow.
So it's fairly protective. And those studies seem to be somewhat consistent with long-term effects as well. I think that it's not quite as clear in terms of long-term, but at least in a short-term, while you're high type setting, that really, pretty heavily impacts that. So I'd be very curious to know, in terms of what you're talking about in terms of the selective memory dump thing, how that applies.
Yeah. I will definitely get that information from him and pass it along to you. what he was referencing when he was talking to me about it. But yeah, it's like you said, I'm a big advocate of water, but too much of it is going to kill me, right? So it's really about finding the balance. And I think, going here where it's using science to understand some of this stuff, taking the emotion, the judgment out of it, all of that stuff that just gets in the way just makes so much sense. So I think you've chosen such a fascinating path to study all of these things and approach really a very healthy way to approach it. And, I'd like to switch gears for a minute and talk a bit about how sound, being a music producer, and I'd love to hear about the sound chamber that you've created and sort of what's the connection between sound and body and how that affects our genetics as well.
Absolutely. So, like I mentioned before, I was hired to work in the sound chamber, and I didn't create it. I didn't build it myself, but I've created all of the music and the programs that get played through.
Okay, gotcha.
And so, So this is it's an anechoic chamber, which is designed so that there's no reflections in the room. And what we do is we have this floating recliner that we can actually raise up and down on a pulley, on like a winch and a pulley, and position your head in the exact center of this space. And there's 8 speakers and a sub positioned completely equidistantly, actually in the shape of a star tetrahedron around the room. And your head is in the exact center of it. And because there's no reflections in the room, it creates this amazing coherence, this like perfectly phased coherent spot in the center of the room where, you can play almost anything through this speaker setup and it sounds amazing. But then what I've done is I've really taken advantage of the 3-dimensional capabilities of the room and the ability to kind of move sound independently around these speakers. And there's a phenomenon called brainwave entrainment, where your brain will naturally attune to certain rhythms, and you can influence the frequency at which your brain waves fire. And different brainwave states are associated with, different types of consciousness, like waking and concentrating versus meditative states versus sleeping. And the brain has this amazing ability to sort of shift into these modes when they're given the right stimulus. So what we do is we kind of combine some of that information and research and capability with the ability to move sound around in a room and create coherence between the 2 hemispheres of the brain really powerfully.
Cool.
And most deep meditation is associated with more communication between the hemispheres, float tanks, pretty much all of the range of altered type experiences have that as a feature. And so we're able to sort of prompt the brain to move into these very connected and coherent states. And, most people walk out of there feeling like they're floating. People really do, compare it to like a massage with sound for your body. And, maybe about a third of the time we have people really that have sort of many mystical experiences in there too.
Wow.
It's really quite amazing.
A third of the time.
It's pretty common. Like there's usually some type of, whoa, I was not expecting that to happen type experience that people have. It's pretty remarkable. I'm amazed every time, I'm continuously amazed by the experiences that people have and describe. But as far as the relationship to genes and genetic expression, there's a pretty large body of research that really connects the ability for you to relax your nervous system and come into, calm, deep, relaxed states with better gene expression. And it ties in, and if you look it up, in the scientific literature, they call it just the relaxation effect. And there's a number, quite a bit of different studies looking at genetic expression and people who engage with the relaxation effect. So when you're meditating, when you're doing, Tai Chi or anything that's putting you in this zone type, highly self-aware, paying attention to your breath state where you're able to generate that, it really does have positive effects on your genetic expression. And it's amazing to be able to affect that in this way. And so, we're using sound to sort of amplify the relaxation effect and give people the opportunity to take, an hour out of their day and just totally zone into themselves.
Cool.
And so, it's pretty exciting to get to do that for people and see the response.
I know where I'm going when I visit Asheville next. Like,
yeah, please. Well, I'll give you the tour.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, it kind of leads something that you said into as we sort of wind down here. One of the questions, and I'll let you off the hook if you don't have something, but because you already shared a pretty cool synchronicity story at the top. But I love stories of synchronicity, serendipity, positive paranormal kind of stories. Do you have anything good to share, like, and maybe even that's tied to the chamber? Not necessarily, but just since you brought it up, that could be cool. If you have something fun to share.
Well, okay, I'll tell you. How's this? I actually run a group on Facebook called Competitive Synchronicity World League Championship Series.
Oh, okay. So you might have heard a synchronicity or two.
Yeah, it's the only competitive synchronicity league on the internet that I'm aware of.
What? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Like, how have I not been invited to this?
I'll invite you to it.
Okay, I'm in.
Yeah, it's fun. It's people posting their synchronicities and not taking them too seriously, and getting awarded fake points for the quality of their synchronicity. I love it.
What a great idea.
So yeah, any of your listeners that are interested in joining the league, just type in Competitive Synchronicity World League Championship Series into your Facebook search bar.
It's so funny.
We'll approve your application and you can get started right away. That's
so good. Very clever. Do you have one of your great winning stories that you want to share?
Let's see. I don't have one off the top of my head right now. I can go look in the group and see what was posted most recently. How's that? Give me 1 second.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
Oh, wait, here's someone. Here we go. Okay. Here's someone posting. This is just, classic top tier synchronicity. Someone saw something about the date 11/11/11 at 11/11 at 1:11 a.m. and they took a screenshot of it, and there's proof that happened. Yep.
Gosh. That is what I would call a multi-layered synchronicity. I actually just took, it's funny that this came up because I never really make memes or anything, very, very rarely, but I had the Dalian who edits the show, take, footage of Dr. Steve Brule, and where he's kind of looking really puzzled. And then above it, when your spiritual awakening is just beginning and the multi-layered synchronicities start kicking in. So definitely that gets one of those, gets the Steve Brule puzzled face look. And I'm definitely going to be checking this group out. That sounds so much fun.
Yeah, we award high marks for multi-layered synchronicities.
Yes,
it's like a multiplier combo.
So good. So, for those who are interested and connected with you, David, and maybe we want to go down the rabbit hole of working with you, what's the best way for them to approach that?
Yeah, so my website is david-krantz.com, and I'm actually going to...
Let me just say KRANTZ, right?
Yes, KRANTZ.com. And if you go to david-krantz.com/positivehead, I have a contact form set up on the site that you can contact me for a free 30-minute consultation, and we'll get together and chat about... Yeah, I like to just, get to know anyone that I'm working with, make sure we're a good fit, and, kind of give anyone that's interested a little bit more information about how I can help them and how we could work together. And I generally, work with people either in a coaching capacity or in an informational capacity where I, do a genetic analysis and we meet and go over it. And, I've just been... honestly, I'll tell you, when I first started doing this, I wanted to do an experiment to see how well this stuff worked. With a skeptical attitude, in terms of me wanting to know, like, is this really something that I feel good about offering to people? Because I need to know whether this is something that, on a fully aligned type level is really true and
you like
works.
to look,
and
you like to feel good looking at yourself in the mirror is what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've just been blown away at the ability for people to improve whatever it is they want to improve about themselves using this type of genetic information as a guide and as a roadmap. So, really, if you're working with a specific condition, or if you're just feeling like I could use a little more energy, use a little more clarity, I could get a handle on my health in some type of way. I have something for you and would love to chat with you. And the other thing too is that if anyone contacts me through that page and wants to work together, I will also throw in a free endocannabinoid panel along with the nutrition and supplementation and any of the other packages that I offer. So that'll be a little bit bonus for your listeners there.
That's epic, man. That's super, super gracious of you to do all of that. So I'm sure you'll be having some people that reach out. Actually, I have a lot of guests on the show, and it's not too often that I end up connecting, to work with them in a further capacity. I mean, it happens from time to time, but rarely. And I'm definitely interested in exploring and understanding all of this stuff about myself personally more. And so I know I'm personally interested in setting something up with you. So super, super cool. All right. Well, let's see here. The last thing I would like to ask, it's the very predictable outro question. I'm predictable on the front end, and I'm predictable on the back end of these talks. And my last question for you, David, is this. In 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life according to David Krantz?
Oh, man. The meaning of life... The meaning of life is to discover the most you can about yourself and impact others in a positive way. Yeah. I think that's it. For me, at least.
David, this has been super insightful. Definitely have enjoyed exploring this. And like I said, I want to connect with you and go down this rabbit hole a little further, because I'm very, very curious to understand more about my own genetic makeup and how I can optimize myself. So, and I think this is one of the best approaches I've heard to doing it.
Great. Well,
so I applaud the work you're doing.
We'll set up a time to chat and get your genetics analyzed and get you moving towards optimal health.
Excellent. Excellent. And for any of you who are possibly interested in experimenting with CBD, or maybe you have already, and looking for a place to get it, it's only recently been able to be sold in all 50 states. It's because it's safe for humans. We're born, as we talked about, with an endocannabinoid system with receptors that are designed to absorb and utilize it. If you're a THC user, smoking weed, it actually can reduce the psychoactive effects responsible for brain fog and delayed reactions, and so forth. And of course, as I mentioned, Purium has a CBD spray. It's actually the cheapest on the market per milligram as of the time recording this. It's 1,500 milligrams in the sublingual spray. 750 are the full spectrum CBD. The other 750 are the pure CBD isolate extract. Reason they combine the two, scientific research shows great promise and benefits of both. So this way you kind of get the best of both worlds. It's in a base of organic hemp seed oil. So if you guys are interested in checking that out, you can go to puriumcbd.com. Oh, and that's spelled Purium, Purium CBD.com. If you use the code POSITIVEHEAD, all one word, you'll get a 25% discount. Till next time, until we do that, my friend, journey well. Also, if you're craving more consciousness elevating content, be sure to check out Gaia, which is my personal go-to source for streaming consciousness content on the web, where you can stream an incredible 7,000 plus exclusive videos covering 5,000 years of wisdom. As you all hear me constantly say, it's a daily conscious effort to maintain an elevated vibration. And if you're looking to journey deep down the rabbit hole to do so, then Gaia is the best place I know of to do it, period. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out.